Games, Despair, and Commentary here, and today I want to talk a little bit more about Dune Spice Wars. So these are some more things that I thought about after my original video that I think would be cool or that I would like to see in Dune Spice Wars. A lot of these are unlikely because they'd entail some massive changes in the game, or conversely, they're really minor flavors. So this is more of a it would be cool if situation rather than straight up suggestions for the game. So the religions of Dune I think could play a bigger part. An extra tab having to do with the Bene Gesserit for the Atreides and Harkonnen, or the Shai Hulud for the smugglers and Fremen. I'd have to put more thought into how this would work exactly, but maybe you would have a standing with your religion similar to a Landsrat standing, and that would provide its own separate bonuses or that you could exchange for things. Standing for Bene Gesserit could be gained from accomplishing tasks they would assign to you, which could be almost anything as their goals are grand and their methods opaque. Standing for Shai Hulud would probably be a lot more predictable, gain from attacking spice harvesters and maybe gain for finding new sources of water. Another thing that I would like to see and think could provide some more depth to the initial faction slash counselor selection is a hero system. So my idea for this would be that the characters would serve as counselors, could also be heroes, available to be chosen as their normal counselor role or serve as a hero unit on the field. They would only be able to serve one of the roles at a time, so in every game all four of the characters would be involved. It would just be the player's choice if they're active on the field or if they're in the counselor role. The two chosen as heroes would be added to your roster of military units and have to be trained, but limited to one of each at any time. For Atreides, Lady Jessica, trained Bene Gesserit. I think that she would have an active ability with a cooldown that takes control of enemy units for a brief time using the voice, but be fragile to enemy attacks. Balance wise, I would either make that unit gain a protection from the voice or have the cooldown be much longer than the duration. This would also simulate how repeated uses of the voice can be resisted. Duncan Idaho, the Atreides Sword Master. I think he would fit in as the duelist unit for Atreides and be one of the strongest 1v1 units that the Atreides could field. Maybe gain a bonus when fighting other heroes. Thufir Hawat, Master of Assassins and Strategists. Being elderly and more focused on the tactical side of things, I think I would give him a variety of abilities with cooldowns to affect other units. So he would be able to grant stealth, increase attack, or renew supply, and these would last for, a brief duration, probably on a shared cooldown so that he's not doing all at once. Gurney Halleck, War Master, would act as a general to the Atreides army. He would have a sturdy, respectable stat block, and he would probably provide some bonus to nearby troops to simulate his commands. Most likely this would be power because the Atreides units already get tons of armor through the Warden and they get survivability through the supply drones. This would help them also stay in the fight offensively. Possibly as a downside if he's killed, nearby units lose supply to simulate the morale loss of losing a general in combat. For Harkonnen, Fade Rathwa. One of the best duelists, he would need a strong stat block and, similar to Duncan, a bonus against hero units. Of all the duelists, he should probably be the one to win in any matchup. Pyder de Vries. The Harkonnen assassin, not being as elderly as Thufir, I think he could have a decent, but still frail stat block. I would also grant him the ability to give stealth and also have stealth himself. But rather than having the tactical abilities of Thufir, he would probably have access to poisons. Poisons could either be an activated ability to reduce health or supply of a unit or units, or it could be an added modifier to his attack, similar to the Wrecker unit of the smugglers. Raban. This one I see as more of a berserker. Maybe extra bulky and high damage, a unique AoE melee attack, but similar to the Harkonnen Gunner, he would do damage to nearby allies. Artigan Nefud, captain of the Harkonnen Guard and drug addict. He would fill a similar role to Gurney as a general. To differentiate him from Gurney and simulate his drug addiction, I would make it so that his base passive bonuses to nearby units are less, but higher if he's under the effect of combat drugs. Possibly also increase the stats while under combat drugs as well if more is needed to keep him in line with Gurney. Smugglers are probably the hardest faction to do this for, but here's my attempt. Stop on. I don't think there's too much known about him. He looks physically fit and young, so I would just throw him in their duelist position. Probably the weakest stat line, but some sort of activated or passive ability to make up for it. Something like dirty fighting that reduces enemy power. Lingar Boot, another tricky one, a water merchant. Not exactly a fighter. My first idea would be to give him abilities that drain enemy supply to simulate his control over water and synergize with wreckers and snipers. Secondary idea, which seems more questionable, would be to increase the water upkeep of all enemy units in the same region as him. Drisk, Quartermaster and Logistan. Here I picture her having a similar role to Thufir, ability to provide a variety of bonuses depending on need, increased power, which would simulate black market weapons, increased supply to show her logistics, and I think granting stealth would also be needed just to keep her in line with Thufir and Piter. Banerjee, head of security for Tuek. He would have to serve as the general unit for the smugglers. I'm not sure what I would do to differentiate him from Gurney and from Nefud. A lot of emphasis is on his physique, so maybe he would have a better stat line in exchange for a slight penalty to his bonuses. For Fremen, Shani. I feel like Shani would have to be the assassin, even if only due to the scene where she ambushes Paul. Stealth, the ability to grant stealth, increase damage on first strikes like infiltrators. Stilgar. Stilgar would have to be the general unit for the Fremen. Similar to Gurney, his downside would have to do with morale loss if he dies or something along those lines, as he doesn't have the same types of character flaws that Nefud has. Mother Ramallo. Another Bene Gesserit trained hero. Mother Ramallo would have access to the voice as Lady Jessica does, but maybe to simulate that she's much more advanced in her training and much more elderly, she would have increased power and higher durations or lower cooldowns or something along those lines, but an even more fragile stat block and possibly a movement speed penalty as well. Othane. Duelist for the Fremen. To set him apart from other duelists, I'd give him a mildly improved Sand Killer trait, maybe 30% power and 3 armor, when far enough away from allied units. Now on to my other ideas. Spice fields in Dune lore are created from sandworm larvae, creating excretions that mix with water and then form a pressure, forcing it up through the ground in an explosion, which forms spice and the hot air of Arrakis. Harvesters have to move in after the explosion to harvest, but there's a short window where the remnant moisture from the explosion keeps sandworms away, and as soon as it's done evaporating, the sandworms attack. So my idea here would be that spice fields would be a thing that occur on the map at random times, and if the eruption is not within your territory, you require an ornithopter to be within a certain range to detect it. Then you would need to send a carryall carrying a harvester to that region to begin harvesting. I like this for several reasons. It's more lore accurate, it provides a less monotonous management of the spice harvesting, it gives more importance and abilities to the ornithopters, and it would create more combat over the spice as the factions would need to compete more often for spice in neutral areas or even attempt to go into rival territory to mine their spice. Espionage and diplomacy could both use some work, less of an overhaul, but maybe some additions or corrections. Espionage could use more specific actions that could be used against factions that you have infiltration levels against, so it has some extra use outside of assassination. I also think it would be good if having infiltration levels on a faction would give you increased detection or agent capture against that faction. Diplomacy is rarely any good in 4X games, but as it stands, relation does very little and it takes forever to grow. I don't think a ton is needed here, but I would at least increase the rate relation grows for having treaties and trading repeatedly, while reducing how fast it tanks. Now on to the minor things that wouldn't require very much work. There could be extra voices and sounds while in combat from the units without having to select them to make battles a little more lively. An advisor voice for the various notifications in the game. This would also be practical, as in hectic times you might miss a notification, but would likely hear your advisor say worm sign or worm sign detected. It's more work, but I would also like it if the factions had different advisor voices. Extra map options. I would like it if there was a map maker, ability to save and share map seeds in a canon map that attempts to replicate as best it can a more lore accurate Arrakis. So that's my thoughts on things that would be cool if they were added to Dune Spice Wars. Thanks for watching. If you like the content, give the video a like, comment, subscribe,